Now we are going to understand the mechanism of hearing. We had seen in our lesson on the ear, that was anatomy of the ear, we had seen that ear is divided into three parts: external, middle and internal ear. In the internal ear part, we had left the cochlear part because we were to study it in the mechanism of hearing. So that is what we are going to do. We are going to understand what the internal ear is all about if we have to see it from the point of view of cochlea and how cochlea plays an important role in hearing. And before going to that, we will see what is actually the mechanism of hearing if we have a gross overview of it and you look at it, how the hearing takes place. See, these are the two ears, that consider them these two as your own ears. You have the external pinna that is present. There is an external auditory meatus, that is the ear canal, auditory canal on the both sides. There are eardrums which are present. This much part is the external ear, alright. This much part. Now in this auditory meatus we have a certain sebaceous glands which keep on secreting the earwax. This pinna is for taking the maximum vibrations. The vibrations enter and they come and fall on the tympanum. This tympanum is the eardrum. Now this tympanum is in continuity with the middle ear, and middle ear comprises of the eustachian tube which goes to the pharynx basically, and this part is having the three ear ossicles on both the sides. These ear ossicles are in contact with the internal ear through the oval window. As you can see over here, we had discussed about it. As they are in contact with the cochlear part, the vibrations which were taken up by tympanum, they are passed to the cochlear part. The cochlea takes up those vibrations. Those vibrations are going to start some or other nervous impulse which would be perceived by the auditory nerve on both the sides. This impulse is going to go towards the auditory centers of the brain, where it would be processed, and then we are going to understand what is being spoken, what the vibration was all about. As you can understand what I am speaking now, that is all thanks to this mechanism which is going. Now before we go to the proper understanding that what actually is happening in this part, this is the part where you are going to perceive the vibrations and understand, and from where the impulses would be generated, so that you get to know what the vibration is all about, whether it is a bird chirping or it is a teacher's voice or it is some beautiful song that you are listening to. It is all going to be taken up here and perceived over here. And then we are going to study about this part as well, which is responsible for maintaining the balance of the body. You don't roll like a ball anywhere, you stand still, you are in an equilibrium position, all thanks to that vestibular part. We are going to study that one by one. But before going to the proper mechanism, we need to understand the structure of cochlea, because this is not cochlea, this one is structure of cochlea. When we study about structure of cochlea, let us understand it from the point of view of bony and membranous labyrinth. Now these are the new words. Labyrinth is the word which is used for the reference made to the internal ear. Whenever I am using the word internal ear, I can use it interchangeably with labyrinth. Okay. Now when we talk about internal ear, it is, I told you in the beginning, it is like this, the snail shell that we were talking about, like this, it is coiled like this. If we open that coiling, okay, if that coiling is to be opened up, it will be like this only, and I am cutting this part and observing it from inside, then this is what I get. Okay, supposedly you are having a coil or you are having a pipe, supposedly you fold it, and then that case would be cochlea. But if you open it up back into its original position, it would look like this, and then you see its transverse section. This is what you get. I hope I am trying to tell what I am trying to tell you, you are getting it. Do it with any pipe if you are having any simple tube, if you are having that is flexible. Coil that tube, that is what cochlea looks like, and then open it. That is what cochlea would be if it is to be opened up. Now this part that is being shown over here, this is that opened up coil, and we are cutting it and seeing it from inside like this. Like this you are observing it. Okay. So that is what we see, this is what we see. This is how we have to understand cochlea, and this is what we see inside it. Okay, that is clear. Now, what is inside the labyrinth? What this entire internal ear is all about? First of all, before coming to this part, we have to see the composition of the labyrinth. Labyrinth is divided into two parts. One is bony labyrinth and other is membranous labyrinth. And if you remember, the previous lesson was ended on the note of endolymph and perilymph, which is a fluid like substance that is almost identical to cerebrospinal fluid and rest of the fluids in our body, and that endolymph and perilymph is named according to the arrangement. Now, what that arrangement is? Supposedly, in the simplest way, I have to represent labyrinth to you. See students, one thing you have to keep in mind, it might be confusing you a lot, this ear thing, it is simplest as I am trying to tell you. You just have to open it up. Supposedly you have an ear not in its original arrangement as we saw earlier, you have it in the simplest arrangement. It would be bony and membranous labyrinth, and it would be something like this. There is outer cage known as bony labyrinth. Inside it you are going to find membranes. In between the bony labyrinth and the membranous labyrinth, you are going to find this much part filled with perilymph, and this part will have endolymph. This is the simplest presentation I am telling you. Now, because there is a lot of coiling inside the ear, as you can see this part, I will bring you back. See, this is also a coil. This is also a coil. Total coiling is there. Because of so much of coiling, the arrangement varies, and it varies at different parts, and that arrangement of endolymph and perilymph is responsible for bringing about the vibration chains, and that is responsible for further both equilibrium and hearing purposes. So, this is what we have. This is complex coiled structure. If it is to be represented in the simplest way, it would be like this. It is just the same example as I told you. You are having a tube, you just coil that tube will undergo lots of coiling, and if you cut that tube in total, then you will have a different arrangement. But if you cut that tube after opening up, it would be the simplest arrangement. Alright, this is as again I would give you the example of snail's shell. If you break the shell from right in between as it is in the shell arrangement, you are going to find many tubes and many compartments inside it. But if you open it up, then you are going to find a simple tube like structure. Same is over here. Now, I am just putting so much stress over it because I myself took a long time in understanding that what this ear is all about. That is why I am trying to tell you that don't get confused that what all is happening inside our ear. Just keep in mind in the simplest terms. In case you understand it, nothing better than that. Now see this. This bony and membranous labyrinth are arranged in such a way that outer one is perilymph. So, you find the membranes inside that are scattered inside the perilymph, and inside the perilymph, wherever the membrane is coming, it is enclosing the endolymph. Now, the movement in this fluid or any sort of vibration in this fluid would be responsible for maintaining the balance as well as responsible for generating any sort of impulse that would be taken up by some membrane. Now, because we are talking about hearing thing, we have to see what cochlea has. Cochlea is having, as you can see over here, this is a membrane known as vestibular membrane. This membrane is known as tectorial membrane. We have basilar membrane. Okay, so what we have is, we have two membranes that we have to remember. One is vestibular membrane and other is basilar membrane. Now, basilar membrane separates the endolymph from the perilymph. See, it is just again the same example. If you break the shell of that snail that is coiled like this, if you break it, what you are going to see is, first of all, it would be broken like this. It would be something like this. Inside it, you are going to find chambers because it is coiled. Now, these chambers individually, if you observe it, this is what we see in the case of cochlea. What you have is that there is a membrane known as vestibular or Risner's membrane. Other name for it is Risner's membrane. This vestibular membrane is responsible for separating this part of ear, and this basilar membrane is responsible for separating this part. Now what happens is, these two parts, they form the one which is close to the vestibular part, that forms the scala vestibuli, and the lower one which is in contact with the cochlear nerve, which is close to the cochlear nerve and it is close to the round window of cochlea, that forms the scala tympani. Now inside scala tympani and scala vestibuli there is perilymph present, and then we have another part that is present over here, that is having the endolymph inside it, the separated part. Okay. Now the separated part, this is the cochlear duct, inside it we are having the endolymph. Now pay attention, the basilar membrane which separates scala tympani from this central part, endolymph, it has organ of Cotai. It is named after the famous scientist Cotai who discovered it, and this organ of Cotai has the tectorial membrane which has hair, and this is in contact with the cochlear nerve. Now these hair, whenever there would be vibration inside the endolymph, these hair are going to move, they are going to generate a potential in this tectorial membrane which is in contact with this part, that is the organ of Cotai. The hair, they move and the impulse is being generated. When the impulse gets generated, it is taken to the brain's part and over there it is processed, and then the motor signal arrives again. So this way you are going to hear the things, that is a vibration was to be generated in the hair cells of organ of Cotai which is responsible for hearing. Now see, impulses came, impulses won't be the right word, it would be vibration came, that vibration moved the eardrum of your ear, it went to the ossicles which further enhanced its vibrations frequency, or you can say they were responsible for enhancing the vibration further. It was taken up by the oval window, it further moved the cochlear duct, it came to the scala vestibuli, it moved to the endolymph part. In the endolymph part, the movement was perceived by the organ of Cotai, it went to the brain, and some of it was absorbed by the scala tympani as well. In this way, the entire part, the entire hearing mechanism takes place. Now coming to the vestibular apparatus, how this mechanism is also assisting the part of equilibrium. See, this is the vestibular apparatus, as you can see, this is cochlea, keep that aside. Over here we have saccule and utricle, we had seen in its diagram earlier. This part is, this swelling part is known as ampulla. Now we have to see that what is present in the macula of utricle and saccule. You see over here there are hair cells which are present. We have to remember that in the saccule and utricle there is otolith organ which is present. This otolith organ is responsible for generating that equilibrium potentials inside the hair cells, and those hair cells are in contact with vestibulocochlear nerve which is a cranial nerve, and it is responsible for generating the equilibrium, maintaining the equilibrium. What we see in the otoliths of macula and macula of utricle and saccule is that there are hair cells. Whenever there would be movement inside the endolymph, these hair cells would move and it would be responsible for generating or maintaining the equilibrium. Coming to the ampulla, ampulla has crista ampullaris which is responsible for generating, maintaining the equilibrium. Now this ampulla's crista ampullaris, it is also having hair cells, as you can say. If the hairs are moving like this, we will be able to maintain the equilibrium in this posture. We also have the equilibrium like this. We also have equilibrium like this, that is to be maintained. So whatever this particular orientation or whatever this particular semicircular canal is having in its orientation, that means if it is to be represented like this, we said that they are represented in three axis of a three-dimensional representation. They are present at 90 degree to each other, and this 90 degree would be responsible for that particular equilibrium condition. What you have to remember is that this ampullaris, crista ampullaris in the ampulla has hair cells. Movement in hair cells is responsible for making the equilibrium. Movement in the hair cells of macula of utricle and saccule is yet again responsible for equilibrium. And what brings the movement of the hair? It is the lymph, endolymph, that is moving. In case supposedly you are rotating and rotating and rotating, what happens after some time? It takes a few seconds for your head to come to balance. Do it, you will get to know what I am talking about. Start rotating on your point, and what happens after 1 or 2 minutes of rotation is that you start, your head is going like this. It is not your head which is going, it is basically the lymph that is going that way, these hair are moving that way, and that is why it takes some time to get back to the original condition. So this is what we had in the mechanism of hearing. I hope it is clear to you now. Basically, it is the mechanism which is very clear, that is just the generation of nerve impulse. What we have to learn is that how that nerve impulse is generated in terms of anatomy. So for that we saw the arrangement, or we saw the anatomy of cochlea, and we saw how the lymph moves, what is responsible for the movement of endolymph, what is in contact with endolymph, that was the tectorial membrane. What was present on tectorial membrane were the organ of Cottai, which had hair, tectorial hair, whose movement was responsible for generation of impulse. And once the impulse is generated, rest of the mechanism is similar, that change of polarization, repolarization, and how that potential moves from one point to another. It reaches the brain, it is perceived, and we hear the things. So this is all about mechanism of hearing, and with this we are done with our sense organs.